Hi, this is Flug, and I wanted to make this video to show you a few things about how Bombable works. And we're basically going to step through all the different options for Bombable and kind of explain how they work. And then we're going to take off and kind of show you how they work in real life. And we're probably going to get totally, shot out of the sky by some enemy aircraft here. But I'm the main developer, and so far pretty much the only developer for the Bombable add-on for flight gear. So one thing I'm going to do is just try to explain like what Bombable is, what it does, and why, like some of the little quirks or different ways it works, why it does that. So the first thing, anytime once you've got Bombable installed, you are going to want to check into this Bombable menu pretty often and look at the Bombable options. Just for example, right now for some reason I've been attacked by like a Fokker because I started with this scenario and he's attacked me and started me on fire. So if I wanted to reset that damage, because I actually meant to put it on pause before I started the video here, I just click that reset damage button and we reset our damage to 0. And then I'm going to put on pause, and then maybe he will stop attacking for a while. But you can see you can do several things here. You can reset your damage. You can reset the AI objects damage. So like if you've been fighting a bunch of aircraft and shot them all down or damaged them, you could reset the damage to 0. You can also respawn the AI aircraft, which is a very useful thing to do because as you can see, when you get the Bombable package and install it, there's a whole bunch of scenarios that it comes with, but there's still there's one scenario that has you fighting different World War I aircraft around Marin County, California. But like if you wanted to fight your World War I aircraft in England or in France or in Germany or whatever, we don't have a scenario for that. Well, using this respawn AI aircraft button, you can take your scenario wherever you want. So you just load the Marin County Camel scenario, but you load yourself into, say, the London, England aerodrome if you're going to be World War I compatible. So load it into whatever airport you want to, and then once you get there, just hit this respawn AI aircraft button, and then those aircraft will show up real close to where you are, and they'll start attacking you. There's a different button to respawn the AI, the ground craft or the watercraft. Sometimes it's convenient to do those separately, but like if you're doing a bombing mission with tanks, you can load that scenario and then go to wherever you want to bomb the tanks. Maybe go to the Grand Canyon, respawn the tanks, and the tanks will be with you in the Grand Canyon, and you can go and bomb them. So that way, one scenario, like if you have a tank scenario, you only need one, not 500 for every different part of the world, because you can just respawn them wherever you are. So that's what those buttons are, and they're also useful like if you load up with 3 World War I aircraft like I've just done. Once you got busy and shot them all down, then you can just hit the respawn button and you'll have 3 more aircraft, and you can just play flight gear all day long instead of working or whatever. So this button right here is just the master enable or disable for the whole Bombable package. So if you are getting tired of it, or you don't like the smoke, or you don't like the, you're just flying around in your Cessna and you don't like all the World War II aircraft coming in attacking you, just click here and suddenly all that will be turned off, and you won't have any more Bombable at all. The 3 select boxes here are ones you use quite a bit, and these basically set how difficult it is for you as a pilot and how good the AI pilots and drivers and stuff are. So the top one is your weapon realism, and this basically boils down to if you shoot at something, how easy is it to hit. If you pick dead easy, if you just get anywhere, within a football field of that thing, it's going to register a hit. And honestly, if you're new to this, I would suggest putting it on dead easy for a while, because it's very, very frustrating to like try to line up behind like another camel as you're flying through the air. Those are not easy to hit, and so put it on easy for a while till you're getting hits, and then gradually move it up to easier and so on. I'm pretty convinced, even though I've labeled it as ultra realistic is probably what I think is close to real life. Because you can put a lot of bullets in the general direction of say like a Sopwith Camel before you actually do any actual damage. Yeah, you can't just like shoot a bunch of bullets within 20 feet of the camel and expect them to do anything. And even if they're hitting like out on the wings, you're not really doing any damage. It's just whistling through fabric and so on, unless you get a real lucky hit and hit maybe one of the guy wires or something, but which is taken into consideration in the ultra realistic level. I mean, once in a while when you're hitting out on the end of the wing, it will hit something vital and you'll get a real damaging hit. But most of the time in ultra realistic, to get really damaging hits, you have to hit right in the core of your target, where you're going to actually do damage to the engine, the controls, or I guess the pilot. But anyway, if you put it on ultra realistic, you're not going to be getting very many hits because it's pretty darn hard. So avoid frustration by starting on the easier level, and normal is pretty good. But I think actually everybody in flight gear talks about we want it to be like real life. Well, if you want it to be like real life, put it on ultra realistic, and then also expect to be frustrated a lot. The next one here, the AI weapon effectiveness, basically determines how easy it is for the AI pilots to hit you, so how good they are at shooting. So there again, if you want to be really frustrated, put it on very effective shots, and they'll just blast you out of the sky. If you don't like it so much, make them less effective. And if you don't like to be shot at all, that's where you can just put it on disabled. But what I usually put myself, which is quite challenging, is normal for mine and more effective for theirs, the AI. And then there's also another setting here which has to do with how good pilots the AI aircraft are. And here again, if I were starting, here's where I would put it. I'd make them very bad shots. I'd make it really easy for me to hit. I'd make them very unskilled pilots, so they won't quite fly in straight lines, but they're like rookie pilots on a Cessna or something that's basically just flying in sort of a straight line or very slow turns. So they're going to be easy to catch up with. If you want super easy, you can even turn off their maneuvering, and then they'll just fly in a straight line, and that's actually good at first too, if you don't know how to catch them. But usually myself, I put it on something like this, which is challenging, but not too challenging. So let me just go through these other settings real quickly. Most of these you don't need to mess with, but if you want to know, here's what they're for. The multiplayer, you can do bombable over multiplayer. It works really well. We've had a lot of fun with it. But if like people are pestering you or shooting you down when you don't want to be, just turn it off right there. I usually leave it on all the time. And it only works obviously if you're connected to a multiplayer server and so on. So if you're not, you can just leave it on most of the time and you won't even notice it. The excessive acceleration and speed warnings, a lot of this stuff, the next few, as soon as I started putting together this package where you're fighting other planes, you're dogfighting against other planes, it soon became apparent that you had to have some way to account for acceleration and overspeed, and it had to be fair among the different planes. And you couldn't, because the way flight gear is set up a lot of times at first, I mean, you can just get in a plane and just yank the stick back as hard as you want, and you're hitting 23 Gs or whatever. There's no damage shown on the plane. You don't necessarily black out or anything. And the other pilot, say, is using Bombable with these settings where you black out at 4 Gs and your aircraft starts recording damage at 4.5 Gs or whatever. That's going to be a very unfair fight. So you have to have some way to equalize the acceleration damage and speed damage, and so Bombable does that for at least some aircraft. So it makes it a fair fight between the different pilots. So that's what this checkbox here will give you warnings when you're getting close to those points, and so that helps you to judge, how hard can you actually pull the stick back before you're going to damage the airplane. I'd say it's not totally realistic because like your SOP with Camel is not going to flash up a thing in front of your face if you're flying an authentic one that says about to damage the aircraft. But on the other hand, I bet you, if you were flying a real SOP with Camel and you were starting to put too many G's on it, you probably have some way of getting a warning, like you'd hear the wings starting to crack or something. So that's our way of at least giving you some warning. And then the next one is that excessive acceleration and speed actually damages the aircraft, and that's what I was just talking about. If we have that unbombable, and if both pilots have this thing checked, then they'll both be on an equal turf when it comes to flying. If it's not checked, you'll have one person just being able to just do insanely impossible maneuvers, and the fight won't be fair. So if you want to have a fair fight, check that. Leave it checked. The weapon impact flak, that's this next checkbox, and that's when you shoot at another plane and you see like a black kind of a little explosion whenever you get a hit on the other aircraft or on the tank or whatever. So that's a really good visual indication. Otherwise you're shooting away and you never know if you hit or not. So that's what it is. If you don't like it, you can just turn it off. The AI weapon fire visual effect, that's when you can see those white bullets coming at you from the AI aircraft or tanks or whatever. So you can turn that on or off there. You can turn off and on the fires and explosions here. The jet contrails, the smoke trails, the piston engine, and the damaged engine. So those can all be turned off and on here. Now it's interesting, the reason I put those different contrails and smoke trails and stuff in, like, I don't know if it's totally realistic, like when we're doing a fight here, which we're going to do in a minute with our SPAD and our Fokker and our Camel and so on. We're going to have these smoke trails following the planes around the sky, which if you ever watch some authentic aircraft, they do leave at least a little bit of a smoke trail. That the Camels use this kind of oil, linseed oil or something, that they would put it through the engine, and it didn't have an oil reserve or anything. It just came right in, sprayed right out the exhaust, so it was leaving this huge trail of oil everywhere it went, which of course turned into kind of white smoky stuff. So it does leave something of a smoke trail, especially in certain situations. But the actual reason I put it in the flight gear is at first I didn't have those smoke trails, and if you want to experience that, go and turn off all these smoke trails and fly it one time, and just try to find the other aircraft, and you can't see them. So the smoke trails just make it realistically possible for you in flight gear to actually locate your enemy, which is kind of important if you're going to fight them. Flares right down here is the same thing. Like when I put the tanks in place or jeeps or whatever, I found out I would put them so cleverly in the landscape, and then I couldn't see them. I'd never find them. So when you put the flare on, they all put a flare, and then you can find them. So it's kind of fake, but it's also not much fun to go on a bombing run for tanks if you can't find them. So again, if you want to be a pro, you use all the flares and stuff in the beginning, and then if you want a real challenge, turn them all off. And believe me, like a tank just hidden in the general landscape somewhere, especially if it's the camo color, it's not so easy to see if they don't have that flare on. The AI ground detection, is the thing that keeps the planes from like hitting the ground and crashing, and the tanks like driving along the ground instead of like 50 feet in the air or whatever. So normally you can just leave that on, but you do have the option to turn it off. It does have a bit of a frame rate hit, so if you're mostly just like flying airplanes high in the sky, not near the ground, you could turn it off if you were that picky. The debug messages, this last one, normally you can just leave that off, and it's off by default unless you're trying to track down a bug for me or something. So, but I've been tracking down a bug, so I'm leaving it on. So that's our menu. The other thing you should know in the Bombable menu is there are statistics. I haven't shot anything here yet, but it tells you, how many bullets you've shot, how many things you hit, how many were damaging versus just hit the ground or whatever. So that's kind of fun to check, and it was a user request to have these statistics. The one little detail there is note that rounds which do not impact the terrain or an AI object are not recorded, and that actually happens quite a bit. The way Flightgear works with the projectiles is it shoots and they go for a certain number of seconds, and if at the end of that number of seconds it hasn't hit the ground or some other object, they just kind of disappear. And it's always a trade-off, like when you're setting up the guns in your aircraft, how fast can you make the rate of firing, which obviously makes it realistic or not realistic, because if you have to slow it down too much, it's not very realistic. Most of these machine guns have a tremendous rate of fire, but if you get so many projectiles out there, I mean hundreds and hundreds of them, and if they're all hanging on for 35 seconds, you have a real frame rate hit, and after, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds, they're not really effective. It's like sort of a piece of lead tumbling through the air, softly. That's not anything that's going to make any damage. So normally you set a timeout for them, and after 5 seconds or so, they just disappear. So you might shoot 400 rounds out of each gun here and only see maybe 200 impacts when you get done. And that's why. So we're going to start up the engines here. We turn on our two, can never remember what those babies are called, but we turn them on. We start the engine. Well, we unpause. That's always helpful. I like to turn on the heads-up display and zoom out, and you can see we're already tail lifting off the ground, so that's when we have to apply a little right rudder. And someone's attacking us already. So we've got 3 aircraft attacking. They're probably going to attack us and shoot us down the shore over here, but we'll give it a try. Now here's where we see something. Camel pilots would almost invariably turn left as soon as they take off, and the Camel is weighted to the rear. If I let off the controls, it rises like that. And also when I turn left, it has a natural rise of the nose because of the gyroscopic effect of the propeller and engine, which is this rotary engine that's very heavy, has a huge gyroscopic effect. So a lot of Camel pilots would take off, turn left, and at that moment they would have to adjust their throttle and all this stuff, and so they get distracted and crash almost immediately. So not good. But you can practice that. If you take off and just let that nose rise or make your left turn, you will soon be stalling and spinning into the ground, and you'll feel exactly like hundreds of World War I Camel pilots who died that way. So that's realistic. So this scenario happens to have 3 aircraft. So you can see as soon as I line up to shoot one, another one gets on my tail and shoots me. So that brings up, the first rule of the World War I air pilots was never fly straight. So if you do, you can guarantee someone's going to get on your tail and shoot you. But if you don't fly straight, it's real hard to hit any of your enemies. But this brings up the other thing I like to do is use the map. You turn on the traffic, and then you can see where the other aircraft are. And you know, it's not totally realistic, like they didn't have a magic map back in World War I that were kind of like a radar screen, but sure makes it a lot easier to find the people you're trying to attack. So if you do crash, the easiest way to restart is just, you know, reset with Control Shift Escape. So now I'm back on the runway. Restarting. Zooming out. So we can see I'm giving it a little right rudder just to keep centered on the runway. Yeah, and that's an annoying thing when you restart, even though your throttle was on full, it goes down to low. To kind of jiggle it to get back. So now I'm trying to put just a little left, little right rudder, just to keep it centered, and then I lift off. And that's basically how takeoff is supposed to go. Now, this is not how it's supposed to go. We've got a camel on our tail, shooting us as we're taking off. So here again, the left turn. I have to be careful, see my nose rises if I'm not really attentive, and you would spin right into the ground. So I'm going to get my map going again. Oh yeah, and when I reset, it also resets the AI guys, so I have all three in my immediate vicinity. And it's very, I can almost keep up with two of these guys, but I certainly can't put up with three. They'll shoot me down every time if I try to kind of mix it up with them. So basically what I'm trying to do with three is evade. And one thing you'll notice, when I first made the AI aircraft, you'll notice are pretty simple the way they work. They only do about two things. And one is they chase you and try to shoot you, and then the other thing is they evade if you're trying to shoot them, especially. But that's about what World War I pilots did. They patrolled. If they saw someone, they attacked. If someone attacked them, they evaded and fought back. So it's amazing with just that rather simple behavior how much they act like real pilots. But the thing I found when I programmed them to do that initially is, see now they're gaining up on me and shooting me rather badly. So this isn't working out well. But it got tiring. Like you get in a group of three like this, and all they would do is attack, and they're very persistent. And there's only one of you and three of them, and so you would basically get killed every time. And especially like if you get in a pack of 6 or 7. No chance. They just all attack you all the time and never give up, and that's it. So then I made them a little bit more realistic by programming into, just like you do, after a while they're going to run out of maybe ammo, so they'll have to go off and refill their ammo, or maybe they run low on fuel and so they have to head for home. So if you can evade them for a while, some of them will start to lose interest a little bit, and they won't just attack. And so that's kind of the strategy if you're caught in a group, is you evade them. After a while, some of them will lose interest in just attacking you, and then you can concentrate on just one or two. So one of them has wandered off, so I'm at least going to try these two, even though they pretty well did me in at first. Now, the other thing, you know, a lot of this, like if this were like a game, we would sort of enforce all these things, like, you know, if you run out, if you get damaged and crash, if the restart, whatever. But being flight gear, we've kind of left a lot of the realism up to you. Just for example, I always play it so that if you get damaged, you can't just go into the bombable menu and hit reset damage and continue. If you get damaged, you have to land, and you know, your mechanics can come at that point. Whoops! See, now I'm completely damaged. So at least how I play, you know, I'm gonna try to land, even though I I could probably make the runway here. Let's try it. But if I'm not near a runway, obviously you can't glide, back to the runway if you're 10 miles away from it. But I just land in a field somewhere. That's what real Camel pilots would do, and then I guess my repair guys would, drive out to meet me or something. But this actually worked out very nicely here. Yeah, I'm even somewhat close to the center line, so that was good. And then once I'm on my landing strip here, then I can repair my damage. You can see I'm on fire pretty good. I was probably killed there, but we're not going to simulate that. And then it does enforce the reload gun. See, I never use the unlimited guns unless I'm really, feeling unauthentic. But you can't reload the guns unless you're on the ground and the engine is stopped. And I'm thinking I'd like some feedback. I think we should maybe enforce this. You can't reset your damage either unless you're on the ground with the engine stopped, because that would be another layer of realism. And it makes it a lot more fun. I mean, obviously, if you just go in here and just put everything on easy and put everything on unlimited guns and just repair your damage instantly, I mean, you can just blast everybody out of the sky. But if you make it more like a real mission where you're coming to the airport, like in this case, your airport was under attack, so you have to take off under fire and you get shot down, so you come back, you repair your damage, you take off. It's pretty challenging to actually kill even the AI aircraft under those conditions. And I don't know, I get hours of fun out of it, but you might be different. Anyway, one little quirk of Bombable is once you've been shot down, and how it signals that you've been shot down is your engine turns off. Once that's happened, you can't restart your engine. What it does is it turns off the magnetos, which are down here. That's what I couldn't remember earlier. So to make it restart, you have to just flip your magnetos, and that brings it back to life. So it's kind of a defect there where it probably should show the magnetos flipped off since we flipped them off, but for some reason it doesn't. So you just have to toggle like one magneto off and on again, and you can start again. There again, if we were making like a World War I flight game, we'd probably simulate you were shot down, your wing fell off in flames, and you jumped down in a parachute and so on. But being flight gear, we're just, the fact that it gave you a message and flipped off your engine is just a signal that, yep, you were shot down. The other thing you'll notice is right now I'm flying this historically realistic Camel that's made with the JSB Sim FDM, which I think is much more realistic and more true to life, the way real camels flew, according to everything I've read. But you'll notice when you're and see, they would go, if you stall them out, which I just did, they would go into a spin like this. They were notorious for not being able to get out of a spin, just like we're in right now, especially if you were too close to the ground, and so you would end up crashing more often than not, like we just did. So that's realistic. But you'll find that the other aircraft that you're fighting with are not necessarily as realistic. They do all these loops and they fly up and down, and you can't necessarily follow in middle of light. Like this one we were fighting is a Camel too that should match us. Well, the reason for that is when I programmed those AI bots, I was programming them to exactly match the Yasim Camel that was in flight gear at that point. This is probably about version 2.6 or so. And so if you use the Yasim Camel that comes with the Bombable package, it will exactly match the AI Camel. You can follow the smoke trails up, down, exactly what it does. But if you're flying this historically realistic Camel, it's actually much more realistic in what it can do, and you can't do all that stuff. So one of these days we're going to get together and we'll make some World War I AI aircraft that match this historically realistic JSB sim model. But for now, you just have to kind of realize that you're flying against enemies that are a little bit more capable than you are. They can climb a little bit faster, they can drive a little bit faster, and so on. But they also have some deficiencies that you can exploit, so I'll leave you to figure out what those are, but you can usually get them once you've had a little bit of practice. And especially, like I say, your main strategy with these is, figure out where your enemies are with the map, keep an eye on them, don't fly straight, because if you fly straight, they'll get on your tail and they will shoot you down. So I just wanted to invite you to give Bombable a try if you haven't done so. It's an add-on to the Flightgear Flight Simulator. The download links are in the description of this video. And you can also try the historically accurate JSB sim SOP with Camel. That's a separate download. It's actually part of Bombable, but we've kind of split off development on the Camel to try to get it nailed down. When it's done, we'll merge it back in with the Bombable package. But for now, you want to download Bombable and install that, which includes several aircraft that are compatible with Bombable. But then you'll also want to include the JSB sim Camel as well, because that is a much better flight dynamics model than really anything we've had before in Flightgear as far as World War I actually combat ready aircraft that really fly the way those old aircraft did and have all the same sort of positives as well as negatives. They'll spin, they'll stall, they'll crash, they'll, like I'm doing here. If you get to too high speeds, it'll start to vibrate and shake and shimmy and do all this crazy stuff. But it's exactly what the old real Camels did. So get the Bombable and also get the additional Camel and give them a try, and you can try them either with the AI scenarios that come with Bombable, which are fun and give you an idea of how it works, but really the most fun is to put them onto multiplayer. And Hardy and I often fly around the Marin County Airport, that's CA-35 in California. It's just north of KSFO, where a lot of Flightgear people fly. So it's a lot of fun, and you can, if both pilots have Bombable and both pilots have like a SOP with Camel, you certainly can play Bombable over multiplayer. I'm just going to connect right here, and now I'm connected, and so I can do the pilot list. And if I should happen to see, there aren't any here, but if there's someone there with a Camel or with a Fokker or whatever, you can get together, and if you both have Bombable, you can dogfight, and it's actually a lot of fun. So give it a try. It really does work. It really is a lot of fun. It really is, pretty authentic, and gives you a whole new dimension to your Flightgear experience.